For a long time, I've wanted to start documenting my travels. I feel that many travel guides offer a generalized overview of must-see monuments and local cuisine, but I often wonder where the true essence of our journey is lost in these guides. While I do enjoy visiting the most significant landmarks of a country, there's something much more important that I like to connect with during my travels: the local culture. For me, each trip is a discovery, a quest to understand local customs, but above all, to see if the things we hear about a country and its culture are real or simply media-created narratives. I like to see it for myself and draw my own conclusions, always trying to find the good in every culture and its people. However, I must say that it is not something I force. It happens naturally, because the truth is, as I've said many times during my travels, I've only ever encountered kind people, willing to help, regardless of their country. So despite the increasing armed conflicts and political unrest around the world, I'm convinced that the vast majority of the human population wants to live in peace, and that there is nothing more beautiful than enriching ourselves by sharing and learning from other cultures, with their own religions and customs, no matter how different they may be from our own. Before traveling to China, my general perception was of a hard-working, somewhat introverted culture, with a strong emphasis on folklore and tradition. We were also told that it was a very restricted country. Upon arriving in Beijing, our first myth was shattered as we found ourselves in a hyper-modern city, with wide avenues, an immense urban transportation network, and far removed from the typical traffic chaos and narrow streets filled with businesses, electric wires, and neon lights that we had been used to in other Asian cities. Many websites had warned us in advance of the high pollution levels due to the large amount of traffic, so we had brought some masks in case it was unbearable. However, we were surprised to find that most cars were electric. It's worth mentioning that their modern streets have bike lanes that, on some avenues, are equal to 2-car lanes, allowing us to make cycling our favorite mode of transportation in Beijing. It was a privilege to be able to bike anywhere in the city, even distances over 20 kilometers, all through an easy-to-use app. Cycling in Beijing gave us the opportunity to see the city's most hidden and exclusive corners. That's when we remember Tiananmen Square. If we're talking about a more restricted and secure place, it's the square where Mao declared the People's Republic of China in 1949. Due to its many political events, it's a place that can be closed at any moment. But to our surprise, our trusty bikes gave us opportunity on several occasions to see it up close, while the rest of the traffic came to a standstill. We then went to visit the acclaimed hutongs, realizing that although Beijing is largely a modernized city, it has very subtly maintained its neighborhood of traditional houses. However, don't expect to find the typical chaotic Asian streets here. The hutongs are mostly residences, with the occasional shop or restaurant concentrated in specific neighborhoods, like the hipster district. And if there is anything typical Asian here, it's the contrast created by its diverse people, its modes of transportation, and especially by the decoration and vegetation around their houses. Moreover, their alleyways distance you from the heavily trafficked avenues that are just some step away from it. I have to say that discovering these neighborhoods is one of my favorite things to do while traveling. I love observing the architecture and decor of the houses, but most of all, discovering and investigating the behaviors of their residents. It's the closest one can sometimes get to connecting with local customs. This also happens to me with religion. I've always felt very connected to Buddhist culture, and although I'm not a Buddhist, I find great peace in entering temples, not only because of the aromas of incense and the sound of gongs, but especially because of the peace that their practitioners transmit. Sometimes I look at it and say that I was born in the wrong part of the world. Lately I've started to question this individualistic society in which we are born, compared to the collective society in Asian countries like China. Although I have to admit that it's difficult for me to let go of this always wanting more, that is so ingrained in our European customs. The hutongs also lead you to one of the great monuments of the land of the dragon, the Forbidden City. I realized when planning my trip to China that during my childhood and adolescence I had always been attracted to Asian films, as well as their martial arts. It's that world of theatrical fantasy that can attract any dreamy child. This palace complex will leave anyone speechless with its grandeur. In this sense, we recommend seeing it from Jingsan Park, which will allow you to observe the Forbidden City and the symmetry between its palaces from the roof. Visiting the Forbidden City, we also came across a Chinese phenomenon that we were warned about. There are many people, and any relevant monument will be found full of people. However, their automatic system that allows you to pass through the ticket compressed with your passport will make any entry quick without long waiting lines. For me, it's another of the wonders I discovered in China. It must be said that in China, tradition is indeed relevant, even in modern Beijing. Its millennia-old history, in a way, is still present in some of its current customs. I'm fascinated by the fact that they dress in traditional costumes for a significant event, like visiting a historical monument. Tea ceremonies, Tai Chi, and traditional dances are other ancient customs that you will encounter on your trip. As you travel further in the country, away from the modernity of the main cities, you will realize that the contrast between the present and the past increases. This happened to us on our way to the ancient city of Xian. From the train stations that look more like airports, we first stopped at the Luoyang grottos, 800 kilometers from Beijing. Here we found the landscape more recognizable for us. Mountains full of greenery, and this hidden treasure that constitutes a true cult of Buddhism and Chinese arts, in which more than 100,000 Buddha statues have been carved into the mountains and in different caves, created over a period of more than 500 years, more than a millennium ago. This place is undoubtedly a hidden gem that we recommend visiting. 300 kilometers further is the claimed city of Xian. Xian is world-renowned for its terracotta warriors, a collection of terracotta soldiers and horses that was created by China's self-proclaimed first emperor Qin more than 2,000 years ago to protect him in the afterlife. Today, 50 years after its discovery by local farmers, it's still being excavated. However, Xian is much more than just the warriors. Outside its modern city center, it houses a more chaotic urban life in its walled town, with its alleys full of street food, but also an infinity of historical monuments. One of the things I like most about this city is its Muslim quarter. In my quest to connect with local culture, it was one of the points that caught my attention most when reading about Xian. So I immediately went to the acclaimed neighborhood upon arriving in the city. What is it like to have a Chinese Muslim neighborhood? Will they be different from Chinese Buddhists? What do they wear and eat? The Muslim quarter is literally a neighborhood full of food stalls in the most Asian style, with their neon lights and cables. But at some point mixed with the feeling you get when entering a souk in Morocco, with its motorcycles honking every 2 by 3. On the other hand, the smells of Chinese spices are mixed with those that are not recognized in Arabic countries. It's an interesting fusion of both worlds. Another point that caught our attention is that we came across a Muslim temple that houses an Islamic prayer hall in a building that at first glance makes you think of a Buddhist temple. While a little further on, amidst the street chaos, there was a house belonging to a family of Buddhist intellectuals with all its splendor. We always love trying to visit a house, whether it's current or traditional, as it helps us to learn about how people from this culture live different from our own life. Climbing the Xian Wall allows you to see the contrast of a modern Chinese city with an ancient wall that contains different historical palaces that reminded me of the Asian films I loved so much. However, I have to admit that many times it's something unexpected that can create one of the most relevant memories of a trip. It could be a monument, a meal, or an event that I didn't expect much from. This happened to me with the Wild Goose Pagoda. This less crowded complex houses a Buddhist temple with different buildings, each with its own architectural style. After days of traveling around China without rest, here we found a moment of peace. Thanks to its beautiful buildings, the sounds of its Zen music, its nature, and the peaceful feeling that places of worship generally transmit. An ideal moment to start thinking about our return to Beijing, and the visit to another monument that Emperor Qin began its construction, the Great Wall. The truth is, I have to admit that it's hard for me to enjoy the typical monuments that we've seen so many times in documentaries, movies and photographs. They create a certain perspective that I rarely manage to overcome. You've seen it so many times that it is as you've already seen it. This also happened to me with the Great Wall. Although I admit that the rainy and cloudy day didn't help, because it seems that this is also Beijing in summer. You can go from extreme heat to a cold day, as happened to us here, so the magnitude of the section we visited wasn't entirely perceptible. However, anyone would be amazed by this majestic construction among green mountains that already are impressive by themselves. I felt small at this height among those mountains while walking along the wall. From this monument, named one of the 7 wonders of the world, it must be said that China wouldn't be China without the invention of going back down to the village via slides situated in nature. If there's one thing I love about the Chinese, it's their somewhat childish innocence. I love their contrasting way of dressing with colors and decorations, regardless of their age. In our Western world, we are sometimes too focused and directed to be the same, while I have the feeling that in Asian culture, everyone has their own style. Back in Beijing, the last days of the trip surprised us with its different cultural offerings. From its antique market to its 798 art district, which houses a huge number of exhibitions in a unique industrial setting. We finished our trip with a concert by the Beijing Orchestra with traditional instruments at the acclaimed National Performance Center, once again highlighting the contrast between modern and traditional in the Chinese capital. I always end the trip with the same question: could I live in this city? And my answer is a clear yes. It's super friendly people, great cultural content, green areas, and its contrast between modern and ancient make Beijing an idyllic city for me to live in.